Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Shopper Marketing Amplified. My name is Kerry Javille. I'm the Managing Director at the IPM. I'm delighted to welcome you onto the webinar this afternoon. So at the IPM, our role is to promote our industry, and we want to bring you relevant resources that help you build brilliant campaigns with insights that really matter. So let me start introducing you to our team today. So we have myself, Kerry Javille. We also have Camille Kennedy, who is the Senior Director of Marketing at Snipp Interactive in the US. We have Adam Doran, Managing Director of the UK branch of Snipp Interactive, and Justin Stevenson, Managing Director of TPN Retail Marketing UK. So we've allocated about an hour today to listen to our very experienced lineup of speakers. We're going to talk to you about their 6 best practices and knowledge from across the pond as well. For those of you who haven't used the GoToWebinar software before, please feel free to submit some questions using the panel box to the right-hand side throughout the presentation. We're going to answer questions towards the end of the presentation for you, so don't forget to submit those. And don't worry too much about making loads of notes. We're going to be sending not only the presentation but the audio file with this out to everybody who's registered for the webinar today. So let's get going. Adam, can I hand over to you?
Thanks, Kerry. So Snipp are headquartered in Washington. We're a publicly listed company on the Toronto Stock Exchange and employ over 130 people in 11 offices across 7 countries, which has included the UK from this year. Our main area of specialism is around mobile receipt validation to provide proof of purchase and data capture whilst delivering a wide range of promotions, contests, digital rewards and loyalty schemes.
And good afternoon, I'm Justin Stevenson. I'm the Managing Director at TPN. We are a dynamic retail marketing and shopper marketing agency born in tradition, living at the intersection of physical and digital retail. We help our clients reimagine retail through content that creates new conversations relevant in a complex and changing retail environment. We're an agency based out of New York, opened in the UK over a year ago, and we're part of the Omnicom group. Onwards.
Great. Thanks very much, Justin and Adam. This is Camille Kennedy. I lead the marketing team for Snipp, both globally and with a focus on the U.S. market. And today, you're going to be hearing from me from a U.S. perspective, and I'm going to be handing it back over to Justin and Adam to share UK relevance alongside that perspective. But just before we get started, I thought it would be in best interest to talk a little bit about what we mean by shopper marketing. I'm sure all of you have heard or used this term in the past, and many of you employ it in your practice, but there's varying definitions. And so for purposes of this webinar, we are using it in a broader context. Obviously, shopper marketing is about shoppers, not just consumers, but it's also about how brands and retailers are targeting these shoppers and to move them to purchase behaviors, both pre and in-store. There's different channels and formats on how we can leverage this intelligence that we earn from shopper marketing programs to benefit all stakeholders. In the amplified sense, which we promised to talk about today, shopper marketing has grown beyond just the in-store experience. It's also about technology, digital, mobile, social, multi-touch point integration that's really bringing change to the retail environment, both from a path to purchase perspective and in the retail aisle itself. With that, we'd like to start with our first best practice. And really, this best practice is rooted in the role and purpose of shopper marketing within an organization. And what we're seeing in the U.S. market is that it continues to be a really fundamental role within organizations, especially in the fast-moving consumer goods arena. Brands like Colgate and Mondelez are actually now proving that shopper marketing is as effective, if not more effective, than advertising spend. As a result, some items like in-store signage have actually risen to the top of traffic drivers in the retail aisle. Other brands like 3M have actually recently launched shopper marketing teams in the U.S. and dedicated people to that practice. Brand partners like Unilever and P&G, whom we work with, actually outsource shopper marketing as a practice to their agency to make sure that they've got an entire team dedicated to it. Shopper marketing in the USA in the last couple of years, the spend on it has actually doubled, according to a recent study. But what's interesting, as I mentioned in the last slide, is that a large portion of it is now going to digital and mobile. It's been reported that half of purchase awareness and influence is actually happening before the consumer gets to the store. So putting money into the path to purchase, into digital and mobile channels that move that consumer to the purchase point are really important. At the same time, 30% of purchase decision is actually still happening in the retail aisle in the U.S. So brands and retailers still do have significant impact over influencing those consumers while they're in store right there in the retail aisle. And even more than that, retailers obviously have their own agenda and their own interests as well in terms of increasing sales for their brand. And so what we found in the U.S. market is that retailers are actually requesting more shopper marketing programs from brands that speak to their individual consumers and shoppers on a retailer-by-retailer basis. So what all this means is that shopper marketing has really grown as a crucial function for brands, especially looking to get retailer buy-in and improved shelf space and in-store visibility. I'm just going to go through a couple quick examples, high level, on how some brands in the U.S. are kind of bridging this shopper marketing as a whole organizational function and bridging some of these online, mobile, and in-store experiences. Retailers like Rebecca Minkoff is bringing touchscreens in-store where consumers can browse and shop and even order if their size isn't available in-store. Here's an example of a shopper marketing program that we at Snipp have run with Colgate. We run a lot of shopper marketing programs that are retail specific in the U.S. So here's a program that we ran with Colgate and Walmart. And the promotion was for Irish Spring, which you guys may not know, but it's a male personal care line of body washes and soaps. And the goal for Colgate here was to actually incentivize a multi-purchase product in the retail aisle because they were finding that consumers were only buying one, and we were trying to up that to 2 product purchases. So we created a really compelling program with a tie-in with Walmart incentives as well. And what Walmart liked about this is that the rewards we were offering consumers for buying 2 products were all Walmart-centric rewards. Voodoo Movie Rentals, which is a Walmart-owned movie platform, much like that of a Netflix. And then also Walmart gift cards were offered as part of this promotion, and everybody was a winner. And just to give you kind of high-level visuals of how the program came to life in the retail aisle, consumers would see the program or the offer supported by end caps, POS, shelf talkers, and other in-store visuals. They were then prompted to snap a photo of their receipt showing that they've purchased these 2 products and not just one, and they were asked to text, email, or upload their receipt to Snipp in order for us to validate it and deliver back down the Walmart movie reward or digital gift card reward to the consumer. And the program was really successful from both a brand and retailer standpoint because it met both the retailer objectives and the brand objectives. And with that, I'm going to pass you over to Justin, who's going to talk a little bit about the changing role of shopper marketing in the UK.
Thanks, Camille. Well, as in the US, there is a changing face to the shopper arena here in the UK. It's a tough retail landscape, actually being driven by changing shopper behavior, which in turn is being changed by the retailer landscape, which in turn is being changed by changing shopper behavior. It's kind of a virtuous circle. Example being in grocery, we see discounters extending shopper missions as shoppers seek best value solutions, making missions more frequent across different channels, making missions more purposeful, yet more disruptive. And so the presence and purpose of the physical retail space is stronger than ever, yet store formats are shrinking. We've seen smaller footprints emerging with the migration of PC Worlds and Currys coming together as example, and more convenience stores opening up. And with clean floor policies and grocery, product rationalizations in many retailers, this is creating less brand engagement and less opportunity for brands to engage with the shopper and the consumer, and therefore their face time is reduced. So the content, which we all are very familiar with, becomes increasingly more important. Content that is accessible will change the way shoppers engage with brands through different digital channels, such as social media. And we'll come back to that in a little bit more detail in the course of the presentation. But digital is changing shopper expectations who are wanting connected experiences. And as such, these behaviors and traditional shopper rituals are changing themselves. So as we're seeing digital integration playing different roles in the UK and the US, an example being shoppers here in the UK are more likely to use mobile wallets or payment structures more so than they will in the US. We'll elaborate on this a little bit further in the presentation, but by case of point, Starbucks now has 7 million mobile transactions per week. And while this is a great indicator of technology adoption and shopper transaction performance, and perhaps even seeing evidence of shifting shopper behaviors, such transactional behavior is amplifying the need for building greater shopper relationships with brands. And hence, we need to change the way shoppers engage with brands within our own shopper marketing practices. So here comes social media, which is our next best practice.
Great, thanks, Justin. Yeah, bringing us to our second best practice, it's really about embracing the influence of social media, and we mean this from both an online perspective, an e-commerce perspective, and an in-store perspective. You know, social media in the USA is not slowed down. In fact, it's ever increasing. You know, there's new versions of social media coming out every day. There's new things consumers are doing with social media. But the reality remains that consumers and shoppers are really influenced by social media more so than brand advertising and brand promoted content. In fact, 93% of shoppers report that they're making buying decisions because of social media. And when brands follow these social channels and brands on these social channels, they're actually much more likely to make a purchase from a brand. But what's interesting is that social referrals and reviews even on Amazon actually hold a lot of clout. So it's consumers and shoppers that are actually driving other shoppers to buy, meaning that brands need to make sure that they're playing in this space appropriately. One of the main things that we've seen in the U.S. in the last couple of years is that there's been a huge emergence of these social communities that companies are building. So solutions providers are building these social communities that are a B2C play and then allowing brands to tap into that community in order to garner social media attention and awareness and a social footprint from consumers, making it a little bit more legitimate in terms of the voice. So for example, companies like CrowdTap actually build this community, allow consumers to earn and engage and receive points and rewards for engaging with brands through their channels. And then in addition, they can be supporting other initiatives that brand is doing. And I'm going to share an example in my next slide. This is a program that we ran last year with Clorox, which was a Walmart program. Basically, the brand had, you know, a similar kind of shopper marketing goal as what we saw with Colgate, where they're looking to increase sales in the retail aisle and also a market share play because, as you might be aware, in both the U.S. and Canada and the U.K., there's a lot of private label brand competition that's emerging in some of the fast-moving goods sectors. So we ran this program with Clorox, and essentially it was an on-pack promotion where the consumers were rewarded with content rewards like music and apps and mobile goods. But to promote the offer, the brand leveraged CrowdTap, which again is a social community where CrowdTap taps into this audience of active shopper mom participants and asks them to do a number of different things, to tweet, to like, to take in-store photos, and to really engage with the brand to create a footprint. And as a result, what we saw with this program is that there was 37% more engagement and visibility than the benchmark that the brand had because of this social community. And as a result, they did see a positive share growth from a sales perspective, not just for the promoted products, but actually across the entire cleaning and bleach categories. And just a couple other quick examples here. You know, brands in the U.S. and even retailers in the U.S. are bringing social to life in store. Lowe's is using digital displays in their windows to actually share DIY how-tos and promote sale of product using popular vines that consumers have built and curated. In addition, brands like Del Monte, they're doing things like digital screens in store where they're sharing recipes for a popular Thanksgiving dish to promote their offer. And so they're curating this content from the social community. In addition, you guys have probably seen some of this stuff in the UK, and Adam's going to talk about it, and Justin in a little bit. But you know, we've even been able to bring the like button into the retail aisle to gauge which products are popular. And brands like Macy's, the largest department store for fashion and apparel in the U.S., is actually using Pinterest as a means of figuring out what they should be merchandising in the retail aisle. So for example, if a product is popular on Pinterest, they're going to make sure to highlight that product in store and even tag it with a Pinterest tag. And with that, I'm going to just share one quick last example that will kind of lead us into the UK perspective. A lot of brands in the US are using social influencers. So not your standard celebrity or artist or actor, but they're using social influencers who have a big YouTube following or Twitter following to actually become their opinion leader for their shoppers. Just a quick example, a popular artist called Young Jake, who makes logos out of emojis and brand icons, was actually brought in by Pepsi to create some interesting logos and visuals for one of their campaigns. And so he's reaching the Pepsi audience in a different way, and he's reaching his social followers to really engage them with the things that they're doing. But with that, I know there's some challenges in the UK with some new legislation that Carrie's going to talk about, and Justin. I'm going to pass you guys over to them to talk a little bit about the social landscape in the UK.
When you look at these social stats for the UK, it's clear the figures are rising and rising fast, be it purchases from social media or the value within the retail sector over the next 2 years. It will be interesting to see the figure at the end of this year for people in the UK with an active social network account and how much this has grown, especially in light of the fact that 43% of consumers say they are being influenced and inspired with what to buy through social media, making this a key channel to exploit and a fundamental of shopper marketing and how brands can create meaningful conversations with shoppers. However, a word of warning from Carrie and her colleagues at the IPM, whilst they're all in favour of blogging, vlogging and YouTubers doing their thing, peer-to-peer is indeed a powerful tool to use, but brands must say before consumers inadvertently start watching what is in fact a scripted ad written by a brand. Justin will now take you through a couple of examples of brands using social media to its full effect.
So fair to say, as Camille indicated, social media platforms within shopper marketing will become a fundamental requirement really to enable brand conversations going forward, given the fact that otherwise traditional retail channels are reducing the ability for those conversations, or in fact the way traditional pure play shopper marketing enable those conversations. What we have to recognize is that in the UK, shoppers are the most rational online shoppers. And this is in comparison to, say, emerging markets, where, in quotations, they are social digital shoppers. What this means, they are younger, heavier users of social media. They want to share opinions and experiences, and are heavy users of mobile application and services in their shopping journeys. This kind of approach to the use of social media in shopper marketing has to change in the UK in order to allow our shoppers to become really more digital savvy in the way that they can connect with brands and how our brands will connect with them. But as you know, social media companies such as Facebook have put forth policies that make it harder for marketers to engage with their audiences on social media, but marketers are going to have to figure out a way to get around this to optimize brand engagement going forward. So things like user-generated content and the new social media platforms that Camille's referenced can allow these marketers to create brand conversations and encourage shoppers to curate brand engagement through peer-to-peer. An example of this is what William Grant & Sons have recently done when they leveraged their Rugby World Cup sponsorship to trigger such conversation through a social media-led promotion for the chance to win Rugby World Cup tickets. The Raise 'em Up 2015 program was a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook integrated program that actually got about 1 million consumers engaging in their brands throughout the course of the promotion. And while user-generated content was the primary conversion driver for this program, blogging communities were also set up to respond to users and to get them talking about the brand, becoming advocates, and talking around relevant brand stories that actually went to help influence brand purchase. Another great example of what's going on in this space is what Innocent have been doing, and it's actually a bit of beauty, if I can say. As part of their core social media strategy, Innocent create ongoing dialogue with a consistent personality and a tone of voice, providing relevant content that is consumed within the platform, building social engagement. But periodically, they nudge their audience to sell an opportunity and create an opportunity to sell. After a series of what they call knock-knock posts to get their shopper engaged in brand conversation. They nudge them a little bit to get them to sell, just like this right-hand image suggests about giving an opportunity and encouragement to buy a bottle of their juice. As the use of social media becomes kind of a de facto ingredient within brand engagement programs, still only 13% of marketing companies have yet to quantify the impact of social media. So with this in mind, how will we see the commercialization of social media platforms? So going back to what Camille introduced a little bit earlier about the changing landscape in the US, let's look at the Pinterest example a little bit more closely. Interesting, since their sort of inception, about 93% of pinners have been keen to use the site to purchase items. It's a great environment to actually go in and interrogate and see what else other people are looking at. And 80% of those pinners use and access the site through their mobile devices. So as of June this year, the introduction of buy buttons on Pinterest, US retailers such as Neiman Marcus, Macy's as we mentioned, Nordstrom, Kate Spade and Colehan have already engaged by becoming a selling merchant on Pinterest. This action alone is not only commercializing the value of the social media platform, but will also help reduce digital and mobile shopper frustrations with certain e-commerce marketers who have yet been able to really optimize their own social platforms. As you would expect, Apple Pay and PayPal are the primary payment methods used by the shoppers who now have over 6 million shopper buttons, buyer buttons to choose from without actually having to leave Pinterest. And up until this point, Pinterest merchants don't even have to pay commission for selling their wares. Now naturally, this is going to have to change in order for Pinterest to be able to make some dosh. But this really is the changing face of the commercialization of social media. And the buyable activity is now the focal point of Instagram and Facebook.
Great, thanks, Justin. And that brings us to best practice number 3. Everybody's probably wondering why we haven't talked about mobile yet, because mobile really is the fundamental game changer for shopper marketing. So our best practice number 3 is identifying and adapting the importance of mobile. We've seen in the U.S. that mobile has even replaced consumers' reliance on store employees. Mobile is their primary shopping companion now, and they're using it both pre-purchase, in the retail aisle, and post-purchase as well. So just to kind of go into a couple of stats here, the trend for the last few years has been, mobile's winning, mobile everything. Mobile's won. It's not going away. It is here to stay. And in fact, you can tell just by the sheer fact that, mobile media consumption is significantly on the rise while desktop continues to only increase modestly. But what's really interesting about this is that consumers who are using their phone to access information on a one-click basis along the path to purchase, they're actually converting at a much higher rate as well. It's been reported that they convert at 40% higher than the average shopper if offered various touch points to be able to buy products. Much like Justin was sharing in that social example, imagine I'm browsing on Pinterest on my mobile phone and I find something that I want to buy. I can actually complete that action right then and there. In addition, what we're seeing in the retail aisle is that consumers are using their phones in store, and they're engaging with offers, especially mobile offers, in the retail aisle. But what's really challenging in the U.S. market is that there's a whole host of solutions providers, and I'm going to get into that in the next slide. But from geo-targeted mobile ads to mobile wallets, like Justin mentioned with Apple Pay, to beacons, RFID tags, the world of mobile is a very robust and confusing landscape, especially as the number of solutions and solutions providers increase. But regardless of the solutions, we do have many examples where brands are proving that mobile touch points and mobile purchase points actually work far better than desktop. So with that, I just wanted to share an example of how one department store or retailer in the U.S. is sort of combating this. As I mentioned, the mobile phone is the primary shopping companion in the U.S. So for brands and retailers, it means that they're not asking questions. If they can't find information about competitive product pricing online, they're actually going to be leaving your store. So companies like Lowe's are combating this by arming their sales force with mobile devices and mobile apps where they can help consumers find information, even complete purchases in store. If any of you have been recently at the Apple Store or Sephora, you'll also notice that they've really supported this idea of mobile payments. The last thing that you want to do is let somebody wait in an extremely long line, especially as the holiday season approaches, and have them walk out the door without making their purchase. So they're arming people at the ends of the exits with these mobile pay devices, making sure that nobody leaves the store without their product. As I mentioned, the mobile solution space in the U.S. is increasingly confusing. But at the same time, it's creating huge opportunity. So what our recommendation is to brand partners is that you really need to be working with trusted and experienced providers who have a strong client roster, preferably also in your space, and who can show you results tied to mobile efforts. Just one example here, companies like Catalina, some of you might know them, they actually have the largest shopper database in the world, and they make personalized offers via different media channels, including mobile, to consumers. And we've worked with them on several programs, and what's really cool about what they're doing is they're actually doing test and learn programs where they're comparing efforts on mobile targeted ads versus desktop, and they've actually been able to prove that the sales results from mobile advertising spend are sometimes double that of the desktop impressions, which means that the ROI for the brand is much better. And at Snipp, we work with large brands like P&G and Kraft and Budweiser across the board of fast-moving consumer goods. And what we're seeing from them is that everything that we put forward in terms of a shopper program really needs to have the mobile-first aspect. We're still helping them achieve their objectives like sales and basket size and market share, but if it doesn't have a mobile-first feel where consumers can instantly engage, we're really missing the mark. So with that, I'm going to pass you over to Adam, who's going to talk a little bit about the mobile landscape and some of the solutions in the UK market.
Thanks, Camille. The UK has always been an early adopter of mobile tech, and as I'm sure you can all testify with the number of times you've probably checked your phone during this webinar, have heavy usage consumption. Not only do more adults than ever before own a smartphone, over 60% of us are now using them whilst out shopping. This will clearly be across a number of uses and applications, but there can't be many of us now that haven't done a price comparison when considering a purchase, opening up yet another channel for brands and retailers, especially if they know where on the high street we actually are. And what we actually purchase on our phones has of course massively increased and widened, be it booking a flight or a hotel to doing the weekly shop. And this trend is set to increase in terms of not only shopping, but what we're actually using our phones for. This gives marketeers huge opportunities to have a very personal interaction with a shopper, but as the last stat testifies, the mobile experience could be improved, so agencies and brands alike need to focus on the importance of the consumer journey and experience and getting that spot on. Justin will now expand on this point.
So recognizing that there is this opportunity to improve the overall mobile shopper experience, obviously the primary and biggest opportunity is to increase the amount of money that is being spent from marketing budgets on mobile marketing, which is highly underrepresented. At the moment, only about 8% of the US marketing budgets are spent on mobile, and it's about 6% here in the UK. But the good news is that we're going to expect to see a tripling of this over the next 3 years. As brands return to looking at more CRM and brand building practices, mobile marketing should actually become a featured prominence within shopper campaigns. However, the barrier that we're all going to face is actually what the retailer's contribution is to this. Many retailers are holding back the possibilities of what mobile experiences can actually provide, purely by the fact that they're not enabling Wi-Fi, NFC, or beacon technologies to be implemented in their stores. And until this happens and transforms the landscape at retail, we will be held back. And at the same time, we also recognize that there's a little bit of hesitation with some consumers. As I mentioned earlier, in the UK we're high adopters and we've got a high propensity of mobile commerce, perhaps even higher than the US. And in fact, 58% of smartphone users here in the UK favor using mobile payments, whereas in the US, 64% said that they'll never use it. So yeah, we are a little bit obsessed in this country about our phones, and in fact, as Adam mentioned, in the course of a day, we check our phones in aggregate 1 billion times a day. That's kind of absurd, isn't it? However, this behavior is fueling the spontaneity economy. We want it now, and we want it easy. And this is particularly prevalent with the early adopters and millennials, but it's also the emerging markets that are giving some indications to new innovations and new drivers of engagement with apps like What's Call. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you haven't looked at it or understand what What's Call is about, I encourage you to do it, because they really are changing the way to meet the needs and interests of this growing digital shopper. And ultimately, retailers and brands will no longer be able to avoid making significant commitments to the mobile channel, be it in-store or out-of-store, to ensure the relevance and driving consistent experience across all channels. We know mobile is still very much in the emerging media space, and with this change there will create more cause for new emerging behaviors, but mobile is rapidly evolving from connecting people to actually networking brands. So as we go forward and look to ensure effective adoption of mobile marketing, here are 5 key, what I would suggest, success ingredients to ensure the effectiveness of your mobile campaign. You've got to take a long view to this. You've got to be in it for the long term. Don't look at this as a weekend romance. You won't getting the benefits of the investment that's going to be required both in your time and resources to activate this consistently across your marketing initiatives. And the shopper motivations and missions from a phone are very different, and therefore you need to ensure that you are reinforcing the spontaneity behavior of the shopper and ensure that the path to checkout is quick and easy. Making the mobile interface reflect the mobile user needs via a simplified customer journey will be critical. We call this simplicity. Make it simple and make it spontaneous. Using deep linking will help get the user to the more specific places that they want to get to within your app, making their engagement quicker and more rewarding. And turning this transactional data into consumer profiles will be critical to drive personalization and to create lookalike models to target for future engagement as you go forward in your marketing efforts. And then finally, delivering an omni-channel platform will be critical to deliver re-engagement with the mobile platform through push notifications and emails to help drive further installation of the apps or services that you're implementing in your programs. Again, this is all back to ensuring a totally connected experience.
Great, thanks Justin. And that brings us to best practice number 4. So we've kind of touched on it in some of the different areas like social and mobile, but really this idea of e-commerce it has gone away, and it's been replaced with this idea that everywhere is commerce. You know, anywhere across the path to purchase there can be conversion points where consumers can actually buy. And you know, what's interesting in the fast-moving consumer goods sector is that e-commerce hasn't really been a primary channel for that market, but that is starting to change. And especially in the U.S., it is changing. In fact, it's been reported that within the next 5 years, 5% of all sales for fast-moving consumer goods are actually going to be online. And interestingly enough, alongside that, 50% of the growth in the next 5 years is actually going to come from e-commerce. So in past, you know, brands have really seen e-commerce as a defensive strategy when it's actually an offensive strategy in terms of increasing sales. And with that, you know, it's been said that, you know, brands need to be getting their fair share of e-commerce. So for example, if 5% of all beverage sales move online and you're Pepsi and Coke and 5% of your sales are not coming from e-commerce, then you're missing the boat. So essentially moving from a defense to an offense and embracing some of these new e-commerce channels as well to create an improved strategy for your brand. With that, I wanted to share a few examples. You know, beyond the traditional e-commerce platforms and m-commerce platforms like Amazon and some of the big retail platforms, there are new ways as well that you know, people are finding to distribute product. It tends to be companies that are younger and more innovative, and they're thinking of different ways in which they can sell product. They're not stuck in the cogs of like a bureaucratic process like some of the big brands, and so they're able to act more fluidly to some of these opportunities. For example, this trend of clairvoyant retail has emerged, which means instead of shopping, consumers are actually told what to buy from know-how retailers. The example that I'd shared in the top left-hand corner is Nature Box. Basically, they curate natural and healthy snack foods for you every month and deliver a box to your door. This can be seen with brands that do this with beauty, with pet care, with a whole host of other items where they're essentially curating what you're buying on a monthly basis. And then we have other companies like Dollar Shave, which Justin will talk a little bit more about in his section, which is more of a subscription model. So you're finding ways to buy products that you buy regularly online and for less and in a more convenient way. Then we have things like fractional ownership, companies like Car2Go and Zipcar in the UK, and even companies that do dress and purse rentals, shoe rentals, where you're actually only fractionally owning that product. So I think if some of the bigger brands in the fast-moving consumer goods space could embrace some of the innovation that they've seen from some of the smaller players, there's huge opportunities that exist in these arenas for the fast-moving consumer goods to take up their piece of the e-commerce or everywhere commerce market. And with that, I'm going to pass you over to Justin, who's going to talk a little bit about Amazon Dash.
Thanks, Camille. Yeah, this is an interesting further evolution of what brands are tackling in order to sort of take their fair share of e-commerce platforms, and this is a pure US example. But Amazon Dash button basically is a device, it's a branded device that automatically replenishes the product that you have in your kitchen or in your utility room when you run out of it. So basically, shoppers who have bought shaving cream or laundry detergent or fabric softener, whatever it might be, simply press the Dash button once they're at a point of needing replenishment. An order is automatically placed and delivered to your door. So this is, again, an example of how different technology is coming into play into the e-commerce space. And with the advancements of such technologies as the push of branded buttons, this connected technology, along with the changing and retraction of the retail footprint and the reduction of product choice within the physical retail space, there's a demand and a requirement for brands to actually exist coherently with their online retail environments. Otherwise, they're going to have to find other ways to go direct to the consumer. We know that the UK e-commerce marketplace is robust. It's been growing at about 16%. And as some of the advanced online retailers that we're very familiar with, like Amazon and Netflix and Argos, their adoption is being basically driven by the quicker interest that this rational digital shopper, as I noted earlier, is really having influence given the change in the dynamic nature of the high street. And at the end of the day, this is really a platform that's just made the shoppers' lives a lot easier. So some of these top retailers, such as Amazon and Argos, have been at the top of this chain for a long time, but it's actually the brands like Very and Screwfix that we have to be watching out for. They're making dramatic changes to their e-commerce platforms such that they are now actually recognized in the top 10 of retailers ranked by smartphone users. So we can see that the e-commerce is truly becoming e-commerce everywhere.
Yeah, as per the US examples of Nature Box and Dollar Shave shown earlier, both of these UK brands are great examples of how e-commerce can help circumvent the traditional routes to market for items you'd expect to pick up and purchase in store. The Graze craze will have no doubt appeared on a desk in your offices at some point or other, and shows how you can take a traditionally shop-bought item to an online subscription model that locks consumers into purchase. Whilst Graze is totally online, King of Shaves was going head-to-head on the shelves with the giants of the male grooming world. Whilst you can still buy their products in the retail environment, by evolving to a more online strategy, they're not dependent on retailer listings and have avoided the associated pressures and costs by having a more direct and personal relationship with the consumer through buying direct and the creation of your very own shave plan. Both of these brands are therefore retaining consumers far more than possible in the offline retail world.
So as e-commerce really does truly become everywhere commerce, where our communications and devices will become increasingly more connected, brands will need to find new ways to drive acquisition and retention. Leveraging apps and devices that will provide predictive personalization, or devices that will be intuitive in engaging the consumer in relevant messages and engagement points, or even relevant robots which will have the ability to learn and predict the needs of the shopper. These will become mainstays for brands to gain more loyalty from their consumers on an ongoing basis.
Great, thanks, Justin. That brings us to best practice number 5. As Carrie mentioned, we have 6, so this is our second last one here, and then we'll go into some questions. But you know, kind of leading up to this, with everything we've talked about, acquiring customers is obviously important for brands, but retaining them is also extremely important. And brands are under greater pressure than ever before to build loyalty amongst consumers, but at the same time, it's probably the most challenging environment to do so than it ever has been in the past. In fact, recently, 56% of U.S. consumers said that the number of brands that they considered loyal to in the last 10 years has dramatically changed, and that they're much more likely to switch brands than they were 10 years ago. And we've seen this by even, you know, some of the in-store mobile examples where we notice that mobile touchpoints actually cause consumers to switch brands if offered a mobile offer in store. And what this means for the fast-moving goods group is that, you know, it's essentially much more difficult to build loyalty. They have their own challenges when you look at the Cokes and the Crafts of the world, because they don't own that shopper relationship. It's really owned by the retailer. So beyond trying to build loyalty, they're also trying to find ways to have access to that consumer. And you know, one of the challenges has been is that you know, companies like Kellogg's, which I'm going to share in a moment, they've been kind of fighting this because, you know, retailers who have their own loyalty cards and own loyalty schemes don't really want brands creating their own loyalty programs. They want them to be part of the greater loyalty program that the retailer is employing. But there is room for some innovation, and in the next example that I'm going to share with you, you'll be able to see that. So essentially, you know, Snipp, we've been working with Kellogg's for a while now, in helping them roll out their Kellogg's Family Rewards program, which is actually a program on millions of products across the entire U.S. market. But what's interesting about it is they're trying to engage consumers in the retail aisle by offering them rewards and points with every purchase. However, it's been challenging for them to track, you know, where these purchases are coming from and, you know, who's participating, because they don't own the retail data. So they don't know if the consumer bought their products and earned points from Walmart or Target. In addition, with some of their brands, they found it incredibly hard to get PIN codes onto package because code printing is difficult for some of the products. So what's actually happened in the last year is a big shift, and we started working with Kellogg's more closely in order to mobilize this loyalty program that they have. And we've done that by offering consumers the option to text or email or upload their receipts tied to any Kellogg's purchases to instantly award them points. And what we're seeing is that we're able to track which retailers they're buying from, which products they're buying, and a whole host of other data that wasn't previously available to them. So Kellogg's is really kind of making their mark as one of the only brands I've seen in the fast-moving consumer goods space to actually take a company-wide approach to loyalty and build out a program across the nation that is engaging loyal shoppers on an ongoing basis. Just one last high-level visual example. As I mentioned, there's a number of ways for consumers and shoppers to participate. They can earn points through their receipt uploads. Some of the products still have codes on pack. And in addition, there's bonus offers from various retailers where they're earning extra points for their Kellogg's Family Rewards program through specific retail partnerships. And with that, I'm going to pass you over to Justin, who's going to talk a little bit about the UK loyalty space.
Thanks, Camille. You know, this is not a new topic for anybody, really. It's been a long-standing requirement for any brand to have a loyal base, as it would be for a retailer. But IGD, just recently published these stats, which is going to reinforce the fact that we're, as shopper marketeers, we've probably focused so heavily on acquisition in the last few years. The challenge now is really about how do we reestablish loyalty, both from a retailer standpoint as well as a brand standpoint. And this challenge is amplified by the fact that 10% of shoppers do all their shopping from the same retailer. That's huge in that there is no loyalty. 10% of these shoppers are going to all different channels in order to get their weekly shop. And at the same time, the shoppers are saying that they would like to be more loyal, but purely they need to find places where they can get better pricing and a wider choice. So all the things and all the behavioral shifts that we're seeing are a reflection of what's happening in retail. And with own brands commanding better perceptions, we're seeing that 60% of shoppers agree that the value and benefits of well-known brands mean less today than they once did. So again, this is a massive challenge that we're all facing with, and ultimately at the end of the day, we're going to have to look to different ways to try and engage these shoppers in more loyal and engaged manners. But perhaps technology actually becomes the leveler. Technology could be the device that actually, if shoppers are seeing their retailer or brand of choice putting some priority around enabling better price comparisons and being able to find better values, maybe that's going to be the trigger that will enable further loyalty. And just to amplify this a little bit further, we're seeing that 8 out of 10 shoppers would actually like technology to help them in their future grocery decisions. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really being driven around giving them opportunity to make price comparisons or to find better offers between the different retailers. Ultimately, this technology will be the enablement to get them to become better loyalists.
Following on from that, one way Snipp helps brands is by evolving a loyalty program from being a purely transactional relationship, buy the product, get points, buy the product, get points, etc., to one where the consumer is rewarded for interacting and engaging with the brand and for brand advocacy. So, be it for getting points for watching a video, reading an article, visiting a website, playing a game, taking a survey, creating and sharing content, or referring a friend, a brand can deepen its relationship with the consumer and make them truly engage on a number of levels. And as the next slide shows, with so many internet-enabled devices and wearables in the market, we can now help a brand reward a certain lifestyle or action, be it health focus with steps taken, miles ran, hours slept, or perhaps pushing a brand's green credentials by rewarding consumers for lowering the temperature in their house, for example. As we've seen, with brands under greater pressure than ever before to build loyalty amongst consumers, the time is right to start exploring additional retention methods and strategies.
Okay, thanks very much. And that brings us to our last best practice, which I'm sure comes as no surprise to many of you. It's about measuring ROI. And while this is probably one of the most important things for shopper marketing, it continues to be one of the most difficult things to do. But as I mentioned earlier on, brands like Mondelez and Colgate, who are finding ways to measure shopper marketing and the return on it, are actually able to secure funding away from other channels and departments because they're proving that it's actually working better than some of the traditional places where the brand would be spending money. You know, the reason that it's difficult is because, you know, partly that the brand doesn't own the consumer relationship, as we talked about in some of the last sections. You know, they're really relying on the retailer to provide data back to them about what their shoppers are doing, but it doesn't get very granular in most cases. So I think our best practice in this section from a U.S. perspective and what we've seen work for U.S. brands is that by building partnerships with solutions providers in the data space and data providers, different ways. There's also agencies who can assist, and through technologies like some of the receipt scanning that we've been doing, there are ways to capture additional data that the brand can own. And so with that, I just wanted to talk through some of the areas that brands can start collecting data. As I mentioned, companies like Mondelez, who are doing full analysis of all shopper marketing programs, they're working with bigger agencies who analyze their entire program, and they use things like syndicated data, which might come from like Nielsen, panel data from surveys that they've done. They can use marketing metrics, you know, Google Analytics and social media metrics. They can use sell-in data from trade. You know, did this program allow you to sell in more units than you did in the previous year during that time period? And then there's things like receipt data from other solutions providers like Snipp. There's retailer data if the brand can get it. And then there's also lessons learned by retailers as well, which is really interesting as a data point. So trying to find ways and starting small to gather and collect this data will actually help brands inform their future decisions, but it really needs to be a company-wide decision to make this data piece important. If it's not important to the whole organization, the shopper marketing team is going to continue to struggle. But the data is there if you can manage to get everybody on board to make it a priority. And just another example of a brand that's even using data from a test perspective to roll out programs nationally. Brands like Colgate and Hershey's are using more of a test and learn approach where they're actually trying to figure out which types of shopper marketing programs are going to be most successful before they roll them out. So they've got like a touch point evaluation program that's not just tactical but also strategic. Basically what they're trying to do is improve the shopper experience by vetting what touch points and where on the end cap in the retail aisle the consumer is shopping. So they trial different touch points in store with different products at different heights, and then they analyze that on a monthly basis for a test program, and then roll out the appropriate programs after that. But it doesn't end there. Learnings are really built over time. They're built over time across national campaigns, retail-specific campaigns, and they really need to be seen in conjunction with the variety of data sources that are available for the brand. The last piece that I wanted to just mention on this before I pass you over for the UK perspective is that there's some elements of ROI that are also unmeasurable. Things like awareness that this program creates, which is really hard to measure. Traditionally, that would have been measured by television and radio and print, but now the consumer seeing these shopper programs in the aisle is still really, really important in terms of awareness. And with that, I'm just going to pass you to Justin, who's going to end on ROI in the UK, and we'll go into some questions afterwards.
Well, I think it's fair to say that this story that Camille has just given us is really not that different in the UK. At the end of the day, measuring ROI is not a new story. It's been something that we've been talking about for years. But obviously, sitting on the CMOs and the CEOs' agenda, they're all coming under huge pressure to ensure that the effectiveness of their marketing activity is being delivered upon. But it's becoming increasingly more complicated with the inclusion of different digital media channels. We've already talked about how it's difficult to rationalize the commercialization of social media. But as we all think about delivering ROI, and in many cases we all say that we can do it, we know that econometric modeling is often stated as the kind of a preferred approach to evaluating ROI. But in a market like us, where scale is an issue and access to data is an issue, perhaps no different from the US, the cost associated with collecting this necessary data from third parties would likely cost more than some of the activity itself. So ROI kind of modeling remains a bit of a dark art. And because of the cost associated with it, many clients actually like to find themselves using more A/B testing models to prove effectiveness, using different cells within different retail environments to actually use that evaluation and use that data to actually help make future decisions. And as a principle, I think this very simple methodology, relatively easy to implement, should be the basis that any of us should get involved with. So really here, I'm suggesting let's just start small, agree what we can measure, and then go ahead and test it. So with that, I'm handing it over to Kerry to
Kerry's just, yeah.
Okay. So guys, thank you very much. So Camille, Justin, Adam, thank you, because that was a really insightful session. Obviously, I think I know a lot more about what's happening in the US, and actually there are some big differences going on there. So we've got some key takeaways up on the screen here, which I'm not necessarily going to read through, because actually we've got a few minutes left to the webinar, and what we'd really like to do is look at some questions. Obviously, we've looked today about the importance of shopper being a really fundamental role, importance of social media, really, and I think one of those key things about that e-commerce switch to everywhere commerce, and what we need to be thinking about in our campaigns moving forward. So I'm going to just hand over to Camille to see if we've got any key questions that come from our audience, and I can see there's a lot of people logged in today, and I'm sure you must have some questions out there. So Camille, can we see if there's any questions for the panel?
Yeah, great. I'm just going to pause my screen and I'm going to check out the question box and I'll be right back with you guys. If you haven't submitted your question yet, feel free to do so. If I can't get through all of them, I will definitely do personal follow-up with the panel following the presentation.
So while Camille's just looking through those questions, just don't forget that we're going to be sending out the webinar with the audio that goes with this presentation after the presentation as well. So if there are questions coming through, we're all sitting here if there's anything you'd like to ask us on the webinar today. So hopefully you've all enjoyed listening to that and look at some of those takeaways that will hopefully have an impact on your next campaign.
Okay, we've got a couple questions to start with here. The first one's directed at Justin. It asks, when is Pinterest launching some of the Buy It Now buttons in the UK, and have you seen any brands using the Pinterest tags in the UK retail environment?
To be honest, when searching for that information while we were researching what activity they've been going on in the US, and I haven't seen anyone yet who has committed to it. But invariably, it will have to happen, given the same way that social media is demanding that type of engagement with their shopper. It will have to happen, but I haven't seen any retailer yet that has committed to it in the same way that the US have.
Yeah, and I think there's another question that sort of piggybacks on that. It has to do with the Amazon Dash button and the UK market. Again, you know, it's been launched in the US already, but has yet to come to the UK market. You know, as and when we have any insight on that, we can definitely share it back with the group. The next question here is, and this is sort of to Justin and Adam or Carrie, whoever wants to take it, is, and we did talk a lot about this when we were planning out our webinar content, but what are some of the things that brands can be doing to overcome some of the retail barriers that they do have in the physical stores?
Well, I think in part it's going to be a bit of a groundswell. They recognize themselves that their own shoppers are demanding this and are requiring this type of engagement. And there's certainly some progressive retailers who are out there trialing. We know B&Q at the moment are doing a bunch of tests at the moment using this type of technology in order to enable their shoppers to have a different mobile experience. And I think once they get to a point of being able to convince themselves that it's the right thing to do for their own shopper, then you'll start to see a wider application of this. But without question, we need to encourage retailers to do some testing to demonstrate the value that it's bringing to their own shopper base.
I think just to really echo Justin's words there, I think all of us who are working in anything to do with particularly grocery mults as well, this is about planning and planning a long way ahead. And I think we are all working in a very reactive environment at the moment. So I guess one of the things I would say is we really need to think about the time taken to talk to retailers, look at the brand objectives and the retail objectives and understand where the bridge comes. However, I think it's taking the mix of when the brand needs to be reactive to a market condition that can be tricky, and I think that's a relationship with retailers every time, making sure that they're aware of where you want to take that brand. And I think sometimes from an agency side of things that can be quite tough to influence that, but that's all about relationship with the brand and its plans and what it needs to do.
Okay, great, thanks. There's a couple more questions here we'll try to get through, and then we'll wrap up and follow up individually with anyone who we haven't answered. The next one is there's a huge value associated with brand and retailer apps, but there's a massive barrier in terms of getting people to download and use them. And the question is, what is the best way to address this? I'm just going to quickly share some insight from a US perspective, and then I'll pass it over to Adam and Justin and Carrie in the UK. But one of the things that we're seeing in the US market in terms of getting consumers to download brand and retail apps is that if you create an environment within there where consumers can actually find more information about products and services, they will actually download and use your app in store. A great example is the Target app. Consumers are actually using it quite frequently while they're shopping in the retail aisle. And what's great about some of those apps is now if they're offering you a point to convert as well in terms of make a purchase through the app. Let's say you get to the store and you find out that the product that you want to buy is sold out, but it's available somewhere else, yet it's an hour drive from you. Instead, you can be right there, then and there on your app ordering that product. So integrating more touch points that allow that app to be a more effective tool for the consumer is going to really help with making sure that people are downloading and using it in store. And I don't know if Carrie or Justin or Adam, you guys have anything to add?
The only thing I'd say would be you've got to make sure the app is relevant to the audience, and you're better creating your own app than potentially going through a third-party one, so consumers don't quite often understand why they need a third-party app to get to a brand offer. And then ultimately it's all about the value exchange. So if there's value in it for a consumer, they'll act on it.
Yeah, and with most of the programs, go ahead, Justin.
So I was going to say, quite frankly, going back to the very earlier question, half the time it's a bother and it's a bore, and it takes too long when the retail environment isn't enabling quick access to downloads. So that's again a kind of a vicious circle. So once the infrastructure improves, this will also go to help improve the adoption.
Yeah, and just from a brand perspective, I mean, retailer apps I think are incredibly important. From a brand perspective, like in the fast-moving consumer goods, I think trying to play in the app game is very difficult and maybe not the best method, especially if you're running short promotions. It's a lot to ask a consumer to download an app to participate for a 4-week program. So what we've seen, and a lot of our technology is based in sort of a web-based mobile app where it's accessible on any browser, on your mobile phone or on your desktop, where you're not asking the consumer to make such a big commitment in terms of housing something on their phone. And we're also offering, more touch points, as we've seen with some of our other solutions provider partners. Like, for example, there's no download required at all. There's no web app that you have to go to. You're simply texting in using your phone and participating that way. So there's some alternatives there. Just flipping to the last question that we're going to take, and then I do promise to follow up on any other questions individually. The question has to do with the rise of m-commerce and digital commerce in store and what impact we're expecting it to have on marketing point of sale discipline, and is it an opportunity or does it disrupt and influence shoppers?
That's a very good question. I think what we'll start to see is a slight shift in retailers looking at where they place any kind of interactivity within store. I guess the thing is that anybody who's walking into a store still needs to find what they're looking for quickly. And I think what retailers are a lot better at these days is looking at very clear signage, making sure that the transaction that they're doing with the consumer on the shop floor is very quick and straightforward. I think there's probably a little bit of time to tell whether that's going to be a dramatic shift where we start maybe losing signage in preference to something that's digitally led, because we still take it quite a while to change some of that behaviour. So have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think the consumer clearly wants a connected experience. They want an experience that is kind of uniform no matter where they are shopping. And at the end of the day, retailers will be required to ensure that experience is communicated and that they give their shoppers easy access. So whether it's through their existing e-commerce platforms or new emerging mobile commerce platforms, that experience has to be uniform, and that has to be a driving element that has to be considered through their overall communications to their audiences. So I think the application of such point of sale will be critical initially to help drive that engagement.
Great. Thanks very much. With that, in the interest of time, apologies, we've gone 5 minutes past the hour. I just wanted to reiterate Carrie's sentiment. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We will be sending down a copy of this presentation. It will come from Carrie's group at the IPM, including the deck and the webinar recording. So I guess with that, we'll close. And thanks, everyone, and have a really nice afternoon.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.